Hello everyone, welcome back to the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. My name is Michaela, I am a knitter from Dublin, Ireland, and this is podcast episode number 14. If you're new here, thank you so much for tuning in, and if you're a returning viewer, thank you also for coming back. Today I have just one finished object, that's actually not really a finished object. I also have a few whips. I have some acquisitions from Barcelona Knits, which I was at a few weeks ago. And I have a very small update about the yarn shop directory that I was talking about a few episodes ago. If you don't know what I'm talking about, maybe if you're new here or if you've forgotten, a few episodes ago I mentioned that I get a lot of questions from my Irish viewers asking where I get yarns like Sandnes Garn and Knitting for Olive and Isir, any of this kind of Scandinavian brands that you might think of. And because we don't have a lot of them in Ireland in person, so I had mentioned that I was planning on making like a yarn shop directory that would have a list of European yarn shops that sell those yarns and ship to Ireland. So yeah, I will have an update on that towards the end of the video. But for now, I'm just going to briefly talk about what I'm wearing, and that is my Rivendell cardigan by Sari Nordland. This was a finished object in the last episode, so if you want to know more about it, definitely recommend you go back and check out that episode. But basically it's a drop shoulder V-neck cabled cardigan, and it is my absolute pride and joy. I have worn this a lot and I've gotten some compliments on it, and I'm obviously very quick to tell people that I made it. Sometimes I tell them I made it without even being prompted. I'll just walk up to them and be like, I made this cardigan. Because I'm just so proud of it. It is my pride and joy. I fawned over it in the last episode, so I won't do any more of that here. But yeah, all details are on my Ravelry page and previous podcast episodes. First finished object that's actually not really a finished object is this pair of vanilla socks. Actually, first and only. I don't have any other finished objects, and yeah, these aren't technically finished, and I'll explain why. But yeah, they are a pair of vanilla socks that I'm making for my sister for Christmas. The main colour yarn is from Ballihora Fibres and it's called Echinacea Supreme, and I actually used it to make a pair of socks previously, so this is just what I had left over. And the pink colour is Kremka Edelweiss Alpaca 4-ply, and I think the colour is just called Rosa, like pink, but I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's just the light pink colour. And yeah, these are just a vanilla sock. I talked about them in the last episode because they were giving me a bit of grief with the yarn meterage that I had left. I had done some maths, as I do, to try and figure out how long I could make the leg while still having enough yarn left over to make the foot. So I was doing these cuff down. So I had basically worked 10 rows, weighed that, figured out how much yarn I needed for 10 rows, and I also figured out how many stitches were in the gusset section. So I actually calculated how many stitches would be in row 1 of the gusset decreases, row 2, and so on for all 25 rows or whatever of the gusset decreases, and I figured out how much yarn I would need for all of those stitches, which was a bit excessive. And I also figured out how much yarn I would need for the rest of the foot, and the value that I got in the end was 16 grams. I knew that that was an overestimate because I had rounded up just to be sure that I would have enough, and I'm pleased to report that the foot actually used about 14.5 grams. So only 1.5 grams less than that 16 grams, which is actually very close, and I'm really impressed with my own ability to calculate that accurately. So yeah, I'm feeling a bit chuffed about that. But I have tried them on, and unfortunately the foot is just a little bit too short. So the circumference is fine, the heel's fine, but the actual length of the foot is too short, even though it has the same number of rows that I do in any other pair of socks that I make that fit me. And me and my sisters are the same shoe size, so they should fit me. So I'm not really sure what could be making them feel so tight if they have the same number of rows. I did do 60 stitches for the leg, where I usually do 64. 60 does fit as well, so I decided just to do 60, but I'm wondering if that made the gusset section a little bit tighter, which in turn is kind of pulling up from the rest of the foot. It sounds like I'm thinking about it too much, to be honest. I know it sounds a bit convoluted, but that's the only difference between these socks and any other pair of socks that I have made for myself. So that's the only thing I could think of that would be making them too short. Anyway, I am going to undo the bind off at the toe, and I'm going to rip it back and add a few more rows. I have 2.5 grams left of the main colour, which should give me about 5 rounds for each sock. So I'll probably work those 5 rounds. And to be honest, I'll probably measure the sock, and which is something I haven't done in a long time, you know, like measuring it until it reaches, I think it's 2 centimeters shorter than your foot length, and then those 2 centimeters will be the toe. So I haven't had to measure a sock in a long time because I know how long to make socks now that fit, but obviously I think I'll have to go back to the measuring tape with these, which is fine. So that's why they're not a finished object, but I just don't want to show them again in the next episode because they're pretty much finished. I mean, they look finished, the colours look really cute together, I think. And yeah, if these were for me, I would have just left it as is. Like, yeah, they're a little bit tight, but they still fit. And I just wouldn't be bothered enough to rip it back. But because they're a gift, I actually want to feel proud of giving them. I don't want to give them and be like, look, they're a bit tight, but I'll give you a proper fitting pair next time. So I obviously want them to be a well-fitting pair of socks. So that's why I'm going to redo them. So yeah, that is my only finished object that's still not really a finished object. So with that, we will move on to whips. First whip I'm going to talk about today is my Mackenzie scarf, which is a pattern by Sari Nordland. And you can see it here, and I've actually made a good bit of progress. So I didn't show it in the last episode because I hadn't made much progress, but I brought this to Barcelona with me for Barcelona Knits, and the following weekend, which was the weekend just gone, I was also in Budapest, so I brought it there as well. So during those two trips I got a lot done. I actually completed one whole, sorry, let me open it up. I actually completed one whole diagonal stripe section plus a little bit extra between those two weekend trips, so I thought that was pretty good progress. I actually have my Bubbles and Berries progress keeper here, which I don't know when I put that on. I just haven't moved it yet. Maybe I'll move it today, and in the next episode we can see how much progress I've made since now. But yeah, so this is a pattern by Sari Nordland. It's a 2-colour brioche pattern, and the yarn that I'm using is from Ballyhora Fibres. The dark blue is called Lake Muskerry and the light blue is called Wild Atlantic Way, and they're both in the 4-ply sock base. They're both from her Ireland collection, which was available for pre-order a few weeks ago, and she did gift them to me to make this scarf, and it's turning out so well. I really like it. I really thought I would be bored of this by now, but I'm still enjoying it. I've mentioned before that I just think the nature of the superwash yarn with the squishy brioche, it feels really comfortable in my hands, and that's really a huge contributing factor to why I'm still working on this. It just feels nice in my hands, and that's what I like the most about it. Sorry, I should mention I have 2 stripes done and I'm just started the 3rd. So I did a mid-project block after the first stripe to figure out how long I wanted to make mine. So the pattern has 4 of these diagonal stripe sections, but the pattern is also wider. So these diagonal stripe sections, because you work them up until you run out of stitches on this end, in the pattern they would be longer, like they might reach up to here because the scarf is wider. So they would kind of extend up this way, and then, the stripe section would end here. And then as soon as you finish one stripe section in the pattern, you start another one. And you have 4 of those stripe sections. According to the pattern, the scarf should be 95 inches long when it's finished, if you've met gauge and all this. But I mean, of course, the scarf, so gauge doesn't really matter. 95 inches is a nice length for a long scarf, and I have nothing against a 95-inch scarf. But I don't think I have it in me to knit this for 95 inches. And based on other scarves that I own, I think about 75 inches would be a nice length for this. So I blocked this after working just the first diagonal stripe section, and the length from the bottom of the stripe to the top was 12 inches before blocking and grew to 13.5 inches after blocking. So that's about 112% increase. So I figure that 5 stripe sections plus 1.5 inches in between each, and then 2 inches on either end of the scarf. I can't remember what that adds up to. I'm not going to do it right now in my head. But after blocking with that 112% increase, it should grow to about 78 inches after blocking. And I actually think it will grow a little bit more than that because of the weight that'll be in it. So each of these stripe sections uses 30 grams of each colour of yarn. With 5 stripe sections, the scarf will weigh at least 300 grams by the time it's finished. So I do think that just with that extra weight, it will grow even more than the 78 inches. So it might actually be quite long when it's finished, and I think I'll be quite happy with that length. I have made a few mistakes. I mentioned the first time I showed this, I mentioned that I missed a decrease in this section. I managed to fudge in an extra decrease at the end, and I think it looks fine. I'm pretty happy with it. And I did the exact same thing in the second stripe section. I missed a decrease again, but again, I fudged in an extra decrease just towards the end where the stripe meets the edge of the scarf. With this 3rd stripe, I am determined to not miss any decreases, so I have been checking every time I think of it. And the decreases are every 4 rows, so I'm kind of making a point to check every 4 rows that I've actually done the decrease in that row. But I mean, that's something I should have been doing all along, but I just didn't. It just didn't occur to me. It's a bit mindless. Well, no, it's not mindless. I mean, it's brioche, but like I would just work past the decrease without realizing I was supposed to do decrease. I've also impressed myself because there have been times when I've missed decreases, but it's only a couple of rows below, and I've actually laddered down and been able to fix it. So very proud of myself for that. I've just kind of did it by looking at the stitches next to it and figuring out what it's supposed to look like, which is basically reading your knitting, but I'm very proud of myself that I've managed to do it with a 2-colour brioche. So yeah, not much more to say about this. I'm really enjoying it. It's my comfort project. I do think it will be a long project. Like, I expect that this won't be done until March, maybe April. And I think if I set that expectation for myself, you know, I won't be disappointed when it comes to the March or April, and I am still working on it. But like I said, I am enjoying it right now. I haven't gotten bored of it yet. I don't know if I will. I have noticed at this length, it's a little bit more awkward to carry around because the yarn balls just keep getting wrapped around the actual length of the scarf. And it's not even halfway done yet. So I imagine that will get a little bit more frustrating as it goes on. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. My next WIP is the Karla Cardigan by Anne Bensel, and this is a Christmas gift for my mum. I am knitting this in Lamana Como Grande, and the main colour is slate grey and the contrast colour is called silk grey, and I'm knitting the size 3. So it's an all over mosaic colourwork cardigan with full twisted rib for all of the finishing, so the collar, the button band, the hem and the cuff are all done in twisted rib. In the last episode I was just about to start the body ribbing. I poked my eye out with the needle. So since then I've obviously finished that, I've bound it off, I'm really happy with the length. And I've also worked the collar. So for the collar I picked up the amount of stitches that were indicated in the pattern, which is, it's not every stitch. I had to skip a few stitches along the kind of diagonal front edge here. And I worked the twisted rib and then I bound it off. I tried it on and it was way too tight. So at first I was worried that the neck hole itself was too small, which would be a big problem because it's obviously knit top down and the neckline was the very, very first thing I worked. So I had no idea how I would fix that if that was the problem. The more I look at it, the more I think about it, I do think it's the ribbing itself. I can see that the ribbing is pulling in a lot from where I picked it up. So I'm going to rip it out and redo it. And this time I'm going to pick up every single stitch. So I did mention that I had skipped a few stitches, but this time I'm going to pick up every single one. And I'm going to make an effort to knit my ribbing or my twisted rib a little bit looser. So I've actually since done the sleeve cuff and I made an effort to knit that a bit looser, and I think it makes a big difference to the stretch. So that's what I'm going to do. If that doesn't work, I'll redo it again, but I would actually stick to the 4.5mm needles that I was using for the body instead of dropping down needle size. And I might also do a half twisted rib instead and not twist my purl stitches, because in my opinion a half twisted rib doesn't look too different from a full twisted rib. I think they're similar enough that, you know, at first glance it wouldn't look weird having a half twisted rib here and a full twisted rib for the button band, but it might not even come to that. It might just be the case that I need to knit it a little bit looser. So I am pretty confident that I can fix this. That is something that I want to do sooner rather than later, just so I don't have to worry about it anymore. And I've also worked nearly one full sleeve, so I've done the ribbing, I just need to bind it off. But I'm actually not going to bind it off until I know I'm happy with the length after blocking. So I've actually already done 2 mid-project blocks on this cardigan. I don't want to do another mid-project block. Like, the next time I block it, I want it to be the last time. So I'm probably just going to put this onto tubing and knit the other sleeve and knit the button band and actually just finish it, block it, and if I'm happy with the length of the sleeves, I'll bind them off. The sleeves are the perfect length now, so if they grow I can just rip back a few rows and restart the ribbing earlier. Sometimes I would block after doing one sleeve just to know what length I want to knit it to, and then I'll knit the second sleeve, and obviously in that case I would only have one sleeve to possibly fix if it came to that. In this case, I know that if the length isn't right, I'm going to have 2 sleeves to fix, but I've accepted that. I'm okay with that. I just don't want to do another mid-project block with this. I also weighed the yarn required for 1 pattern repeat on the sleeve, realised I wasn't going to have enough of this grey colour to finish the cardigan, and I've actually already ordered another ball of it from Voltraum, which is the German shop that I ordered the original yarn from in the first place. And I just placed my order, and I made a note to email them and ask them if I could get the same dye lot possibly, but I actually just forgot. But they actually recognized my name from the order, and they messaged me on Instagram and asked me what dye lot I needed, and they would try and send the same one. So I was so grateful that they did that, because as I said, I just completely forgot to email them afterwards and ask for the same dye lot. It also broke my heart to pay regular shipping cost for just one ball of yarn. So the yarn was €15 and then the shipping was 15 as well. So oh, I was like, I very begrudgingly clicked pay now, and I was like, no. But I was trying to justify it in my head, as when I had originally bought the yarn, I bought enough of it to get free shipping. So I was like, maybe it balances out, you know, like girl math. But in that message that they sent me on Instagram, they also mentioned that they were in the process of trying to set up a cheaper shipping method for smaller amounts of yarn, and that they would use that method for sending me that ball of yarn. So they're going to refund me some of the shipping cost. I think they got it. I think the updated shipping cost is €7.50, which is half, obviously, of the original shipping cost. So that's obviously an easier blow to handle than the original €15. So when I bought the original yarn for this cardigan, I bought some other yarn as well, and I did talk about their shop on the podcast, and I recommended it as a shop that anyone, but particularly Irish people who wanted to buy like these Scandinavian brands, could buy them from. And I still stand by that. I've had another excellent experience with them. Their customer service, I think, is fantastic. This is not a promotion of any sort. I have had two genuinely good experiences with them, and I'll continue to shop from them for any of those kind of Scandinavian brands that we can't get here in Ireland. So yeah, that extra ball of yarn should be on its way soon, which means that I will hopefully get this cardigan done in the next few weeks. I'm pretty confident that I won't be working on it up until 2 a.m. on Christmas Eve. I'm really glad I started it when I did. At the time I thought it was maybe a little bit early, but yeah, it's nice to not have to be rushing it. I got buttons in Barcelona Knits actually, and I was really excited that I found some buttons there, because I have talked about buttons on this channel before. I don't really have like a button guy that I regularly go to for buttons, and I don't look forward to finding buttons for cardigans and things, because I never really know where to go. But there was this vendor at Barcelona Knits, Botti Button, and they had a huge selection of buttons with them. They had some more unique buttons, but they also had very standard kind of mother of pearl and wooden and horn and toggle buttons of every size. So I took my opportunity while I could, and I got these 4cm wooden toggle buttons, which is what the pattern calls for. And yeah, I'm really grateful that I don't have to worry or stress about getting buttons when the time comes to source them, because I got them at Barcelona. One thing I don't like about this pattern is the edge stitch is done in garter stitch. So no matter if you're knitting on the right or wrong side, you knit the last stitch. You don't knit or purl depending on if you're knitting or purling the row. You always knit the last stitch, which results in kind of a garter stitch edge. And I found when I was picking up the stitches for the sleeve that, first of all, the stitches were kind of loose and just ugly, and obviously it's a seam on the inside, so it doesn't really matter, but I don't like it. And it's also quite bulky. I know it's a bulky yarn, so that's not going to help, but I can't help but wonder if there's some kind of tighter selvage that could be done. I almost feel like if I knit or purl the last stitch, depending on if I was knitting or purling the row, if I just treated the last stitch the same way I treated any other stitch in the row, would that look better? So I have mentioned that I want to make this cardigan for myself. That's something I might try when I get around to doing that. But for now, I'm not a huge fan of the inside of the cardigan. But again, it's on the inside, so it's not really the end of the world. So yeah, that's my Karla cardigan. I will do the neckline today, hopefully, and the button band will be the next priority, and then I'll just have the second sleeve to do. The sleeves I found worked up extremely fast, so yeah, I'm pretty confident I can get this done pretty soon. Maybe by the next episode. It should be I should at least have the knitting done by next episode, but it might be that, the ends need to be woven in, the buttons need to be attached, all that kind of thing. But yeah, I will aim to get the knitting done by the next episode. I think that's a good goal to set for myself. It's getting quite dark out. I know a lot of us in the Northern Hemisphere are experiencing the shorter days, and it makes it quite difficult to film. I do have kind of lighting from, I have a light box that I use to photograph kind of smaller projects and stuff, and it has these LED strip lights that you're supposed to clip up onto the inside of the light box, but I like to kind of place them around my room, which you can probably tell. But they make a huge difference. Actually, let me show you. So this is with the lights off. Far too dark. I feel like I could be filming at midnight and you wouldn't know. So yeah, they're very effective. But I do prefer to film when it's actually bright out. I'm not going to talk about my Ingrid sweater because I haven't touched it at all. I've really been prioritising my gift knits, even though that is a project that I want to work on and I want to own. I need to prioritise the gift knits, you know, for the season that's in it. Speaking of which, my next whip, another gift knit, is a pair of socks. These are for my boyfriend, and I did take his measurements, so like his calf, his ankle, the heel diagonal, and his foot circumference, and his shoe size obviously. And actually his foot measurements are quite similar to mine, except his shoe size. So the actual shoe size that he wears is bigger than mine, but all of the circumference measurements are quite similar to mine. So it makes it easy to make socks for him because I can just try them on myself and see if they fit. The yarn is from Fine Leaf Fibres, which is a yarn dyer in Cork in Ireland. And the base, I'm not sure of the base name, but it's 80% BFL and 20% nylon. And this colour is called Coral Reef. And he actually picked this yarn out himself. So hope he likes them. So we have yet another pair of vanilla socks that are giving me grief. See if you notice anything strange about these two. Do you see it? This one's missing a cuff. I will explain. So I brought these to Budapest with me, and I brought the yarn. I hadn't cast them on. My plan was to cast on the plane. I usually do the cast on and the cuff using my 100 centimeter CHOW needle. I find it very difficult to purl with the 9-inch circulars, so I prefer to just do the ribbing with the longer needle, and then I switch to the 9-inch circulars for the stockinette leg. Because I hadn't cast them on, I didn't want to risk bringing that CHOW needle. I've never had an issue with it before, but it's always been attached to a project, so it doesn't look as threatening. But just bringing a pair of long, sharp needles with nothing attached to them, I feel like is a little bit riskier. So instead, I brought my Knit Pro 100 centimeter needles. So it's the same size, they're just Knit Pro. So I cast on the plane, and I hated it. I hated working with those needles so much. I can't remember the last time I've worked with them, but I don't remember hating them that much. I think I'm just used to the CHOWs now that I just hated them. So I found the tips very blunt. I found the cords really stiff, and it was also like looped. You know, it was obviously, you know, the CHOW ones don't have any memory, so they'll go back into, they won't like kink or like stay twisted if they've been twisted for a while, whereas my Knit Pro ones just had big kind of loops in the cord that kept flicking around and getting in the way, and I really hated knitting with them. I did try to switch over to the 9-inch circulars for the ribbing, but as I said, I just find it very uncomfortable to purl with the 9-inch circulars, so I also hated that. So I didn't really know what to do. I did have my Mackenzie scarf with me, but I kind of wanted to have two projects, you know, so I had options to work on. So I could, if I didn't want to work on one, I could work on the other. So as well as it being uncomfortable to work with, the cuff was turning out huge. Actually, I haven't fixed this yet, so it probably won't mean much to you for me to just stretch it out on camera, but it feels loose. It doesn't feel like it's cinching in the way my 2x2 rib usually does cinch in, and yeah, when I was knitting it up, I could tell it's just too big. So I decided to just forget the cuff, switch to stockinette, and figure out what my gauge was. I didn't know if it was because I was struggling with the needles or if it was the nature of the yarn. This yarn does have a lower meterage than fingering weight yarns that I'd usually use for socks. I think it's got 365 meters per 100 grams, which is it's not a huge difference, but I was wondering if maybe that was what was causing this looser cuff. So I decided to just switch to my 9-inch circulars and work in stockinette and figure out what my gauge was. So after a few rows, I measured and my gauge was 7.5 stitches per inch, whereas my sock gauge is usually 8 to 9 stitches per inch. So I did some more kind of gauge calculations, and I figured that I should actually cast on 60 stitches to get the circumference that I wanted. I also measured stretched and unstretched, and I figured out what kind of percentage of stretch there was in this sock. And I did the same for the ribbing to make sure that a smaller cuff would still be able to get over my ankle. So I was pretty confident that I could knit 60 stitches and it would still fit. I just didn't want to do the cuff again because I just struggled with it so much. So I did something probably a bit unusual, and I just did decreases in the next round that I was worked on, and I started knitting a 60 round leg. I also did something I haven't done before, and I added some decreases halfway down for the skinnier ankle portion. So the leg is 60 rounds total, and it starts with 60 stitches. At round 30 I decreased to 56 stitches, and at round 58 I increased back up to 64 stitches because I know that 56 stitches would be too small for the heel. I did it in round 58 as opposed to round 60 because I wanted to give the increases an opportunity to actually have an effect on the circumference. So yeah, and I've tried it on and I'm actually really happy with the fit now, apart from the cuff. We'll get to that. And I've obviously done the heel flap and the heel turn. I've just started the gusset decreases on this sock, and on the other sock I have done the heel flap and turn, and one of my stitches has fallen off. I'm not sure what I'm going to decrease to for the foot. Most of my socks are 64 stitches, which I actually find a little bit loose anyway, so I might go down to 60 stitches for the foot. I need to double check the foot circumference measurements that I have. But yeah, I'm going to try these on as I go as well and see how they fit. As for the cuff, I am doing something that I've never done before, and I'm actually just going to go back in with my needle, pick up the stitches just below the cuff, cut the cuff out and re-knit it from the bottom up. So yeah, that's why this other sock doesn't have a cuff, because I actually just didn't even bother. I just did a long tail cast on and started knitting a stockinette tube, and I'm going to do the same thing, just pick up the stitches, cut out the cast on edge and re-knit the cuff from the bottom up. I'm feeling good about these working out. They're obviously a little bit more work than a vanilla sock usually is for me, but that's kind of the story of my life right now, as you can probably tell. I have one more pair of socks to knit as a gift after these ones, and then I am so excited to knit a pair of socks for myself. I have so many nice sock yarns there that I want to use. I also have a friend living in Canada, and she's coming back to Ireland for Christmas, and I actually got some self-striping yarn from Mud Punch delivered to her, and she's gonna bring it back with her, and she's back in the middle of December. So that is my goal for getting my sock gifts done, because when she comes back with those yarns, one of them is like a Christmassy theme, I'm going to cast on those socks as my reward to myself for knitting all of these gift socks. And that is actually all of my whips for today, so we will move on to acquisitions, and all of my acquisitions in this episode are from Barcelona Knits, which was 2 weeks ago, I think, 2 weeks ago. And I had such a lovely time. It was kind of a last minute, well, it wasn't really a last minute plan, but it was kind of a spontaneous plan. Like, I didn't think about it too much before I booked the flights and booked my ticket. I just saw that there were cheap flights to Barcelona for that weekend, and I was like, I might as well go. So I booked flights there and then. My flights to Barcelona return were only €50, so I feel like I would have been mad not to go. I feel very grateful to be alive at the same time as Michael O'Leary and Ryanair. They're just, I know people complain about Ryanair. I don't dare, because I don't know where I'd be without them. Actually, I do know. I would be at home every weekend. It's getting very, very dark. I don't think the lighting's great, but anyway. Barcelona Knits. It was my first time attending a big festival like that. I actually bumped into a friend who I know through Instagram, Kiliana. Her Instagram name is a Dutch word that I told her I wouldn't be able to pronounce. Bregenwijs. I'm sorry. I will link it down below. No. Oh God, I can't say it. Dutch, my mouth muscles don't move in a way that allows me to say Dutch words. Anyway, she introduced me to her friends, and I spent part of the day with them, and I also spent the evening with them, which was so nice. I went over to Barcelona by myself. I had no expectations, even for the yarn festival itself. I didn't really look up much about the festival or the vendors. I just kind of wanted to go and see what it was all about. I figured I might see people I know, but I was also happy to keep myself company for the weekend if that's what it came to. Ultimately, I did bump into Kiliana, and she introduced me to her friends. There was one woman who came up to me and told me that she watches the channel, and basically she recognized me, which I did not expect to happen in a million years. So I was a bit flustered, and I did not ask for her name, or if you're watching this, I did not ask for your name, and I'm very sorry about that. That was very rude of me. So if you're watching this, please do leave a comment down below and tell me your name, because I feel a bit rude that I didn't ask. I was so flustered in the moment, and thank you so much for coming up to me. That was so kind of you, and it really made my day. I'll insert some clips here of some of the stalls. There was obviously a huge selection of vendors. I kind of went with the mentality of I have enough yarn, I don't need any. And also I assumed correctly that most of the vendors, if not all, had online shops that I could buy from if I really wanted to. So whenever I felt tempted by yarn, I told myself I can get it online. Unless I really, really wanted it in that moment. So I did buy a few things, but I didn't go overboard. All of my yarn is in this little drawstring bag from All You Knit Is Love, which is a yarn shop in Barcelona, but they had their own stall there. But one of my favourite stalls was called Sock Una Troca, and they had a lot of variegated yarns, including sock yarns. And my favourite thing about their stall was that they had 50-gram skeins, and they also had like a carousel of 20-gram minis. So you could essentially build a sock set with a 50-gram and a 20-gram mini skein, which I really, really liked. So I have a 20-gram mini skein that I got with a sock set last year, and I've actually used the main colour for another pair of socks. And I wanted to get like a 50-gram skein to use with this. So I got this 50-gram skein of their Weekender base, which is 75% merino and 25% nylon. And it's 212 meters, and this is in the colour Platypus. Beautiful greens and blues. I knew when I had this mini skein that I wanted a green blue base yarn, so I actually think these go quite well together. Pretty happy with my selection there. I didn't actually have this one with me to hold up against it, so all things considered, I think I picked out a good match. I think they'll look really nice together in a sock. The other thing I got from Sock Una Troca was this 50-gram lace weight yarn. This is their Blur base, which is 42% baby alpaca, 35% silk, 13% superfine merino, and 10% yak. Lots of different fibres in there, and not something, I haven't worked with anything close to this, so I'm really excited to use this. My intention was to hold this with the fine leaf fibre skein that I showed in the last episode, but now that I hold them up next to each other, I think they're completely different shades of green, so I'm not sure if I'll go ahead with that plan, but I'll definitely find a use for this. Anyway, it's really soft, and as I said, it's not something I've ever worked with before, so I'm excited to give it a try. There was also a vendor called El Robledal de la Santa that I really liked, and from their stall I got this mohairino base, which is 45% kid mohair and 55% merino. It's fingering weight of 400 meters and 100 grams, and this is the color Sakura. I can't remember the last time I was so quickly drawn to a yarn. Like, I saw this on a table and I was like, I need that. I will find something to make with it. I just need it. The halo is just stunning. I will show a close-up of it. I hope the camera does it justice. It's just, I've never seen anything like this, and it's gorgeous. And I do know what I'm going to make with it. I'm going to make mittens with this. I originally thought it would be beautiful for the Field Mittens by Camilla Vad. However, I was looking at the Ravelry page for that pattern, and there are a ton of comments talking about mistakes and addressing questions to the designer that she hasn't answered. So it doesn't seem like a great pattern, in short. And not only that, but the designer doesn't really seem interested in helping people who bought the pattern. So I don't really want to spend money on it. I'm thinking I can find another pattern that uses the same motif that's perhaps better written, and just use the motif for and also find maybe a plain mitten pattern and just mix the two together to get something I want. For example, the Grow socks by Fibre Tales also have the same motif, so I figure I could buy that pattern. I could find a I could find a mitten pattern for fingering weight yarn, and I could just sub in the motif or something. Or I could just make a different pattern altogether. There's a free pom-pom pattern that came out recently in collaboration with Hobby, and it's a fingerless mitten, but I would make it a full mitten, and I would also make some changes to the motif, but it also has a really nice kind of flowery motif that's made with, again, what looks like bobbles, or like kind of long bobbles that are angled, so not just like a bobble stitch, it's more like a stretched out. I think it's a take on a bobble. I've never made it before, I haven't looked at the chart, I don't know, but I think it's kind of similar to a bobble. Anyway, that is my plan for this yarn. I would like to get it done, I'd like to get it at least cast on this winter. We had a bit of a cold spell this week, and I was, driving to work, getting up at 6:30 and driving to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and my hands were just frozen on the steering wheel. And I do have gloves, but I don't have any kind of hand knit woolen gloves, so they're not that warm. And I just keep telling myself there's one thing I'm missing from my knit wardrobe, and it's gloves or mittens. So I'm very keen to get a pair worked up. I know it won't happen this side of Christmas. There's just too much going on. But if I get them done even in January, then I should still get some wear out of them if we have a cold spell in February, which we usually do. It's getting so dark. Oh my God. This is going to be how it is now until summer. It's just too dark, and it's 4 o'clock right now. Oh yeah, the other thing about El Robledal de la Santa is that they gave us these info cards of what yarn or what animal your yarn came from. It did not come from the dog. He just gave us a picture of his dog, which I'm obsessed with. But anyway, this is the goat, right? This is the animal that my yarn came from. I think that is so cute that they give you little info cards like that. And he also gave us a picture of his dog. And I am a huge dog lover, so I'm very grateful for that. Don't know what I will do with this, but thank you for the picture of the dog. I took some business cards from other yarns and companies that I liked. I think I will just put them in the description box, but you know, obviously they're just companies that I liked, and I don't have any of their yarn to show here. But if you're interested in seeing more about the vendors that were at Barcelona Knits, or the ones that I liked, then they will be in the description box below. But anyway, the last yarn that I got was from All You Knit Is Love, which is where the bag is from. And this was an exclusive colorway, I think, for the festival. It's their bokeh base, B-O-K-E-H. And it is 64% mohair and 36% silk. When I was at the festival, I had in mind that I wanted to get a mohair yarn to hold with the orange single ply yarn that I showed a few episodes ago. And, you know, I talked about this a lot at the time, and I got a lot of good advice on what I could hold with it. I still hadn't made a decision, but I wanted to have a look at the festival and see if anything caught my eye. And this one did catch my eye, and I did think maybe that would work. But I hummed and hawed about it for a while, and ultimately I decided not to get it. I just figured I don't need it right now. I was kind of, as I said, I was there with the mentality of just wanting to see what things were about. I didn't go with a shopping list, and I figured that I wouldn't buy something unless I was 100% certain about it. This one I was 99% certain about. I don't know, there was just something still holding me back. I don't know what it was, but I decided to listen to that, and I put the yarn down and I walked away, and I decided whatever this is meant to be, I will find something again in the future. It won't be my last opportunity to find a nice mohair yarn to hold with this. I think that's ultimately what I told myself that made me walk away from the table. Anyway, Kiliana, who I have already mentioned, I met at the festival. She was aware of my orange yarn dilemma. She had watched the podcast episode where I talked about it, and she was also kind of keeping an eye out for anything that might go well with this. And she sent me a picture of this, and she was like, what about this for your orange yarn? And the fact that she also said it to me, I felt like was the universe's way of telling me, just get the yarn. Just get the yarn for your orange hat. So I had left the festival, but she very kindly offered to pick it up for me. So yeah, I really just felt like this was the universe's way of telling me, you need to get that yarn. So I got it, and I think, let me take the label off so I can hold properly. I think they are going to look fantastic together in a mohair hat, in an Oslo hat by Petite Knit. So this might be the next hat I cast on. It might not be, but I'm really excited about this. I'm once again excited about this orange yarn. As I said, I've gone through phases with it, so yeah, I'm in a phase of being excited about it now, so I feel like I should ride that wave and just cast on the hat before I lose interest in it again. But I do love this yarn. It is stunning. Sorry, it's called Sangria Popsicle, and yeah, as I said, I think it was a festival exclusive colorway, so that's very exciting. It's a really nice kind of memento of the festival. The last thing I got, not yarn, was stitch markers, and the company is called Anne Miwei. Again, that's my best. I don't know how that's supposed to be pronounced, but I got these cute stitch markers. I'm a huge space nerd. If I understood physics at all, I would have studied astronomy. I'm just fascinated by black holes and supernovas, and the fact that there's so much about space that we don't know, we don't understand, and it's so much bigger than us, and it makes you feel so small because Earth is just a tiny little dot in the speck of the universe. Anyway, yeah, obsessed. And I've never seen stitch markers that were space themed before, but so I just felt like it was a no-brainer. I had to get these. I think they're so cute. I think there's a little progress keeper there too. Yeah, so the stars are a little progress keeper, and then the other two are just regular space stitch markers. And I haven't opened them yet because I wanted to just show them in the packet, but I will definitely be putting them on a project as soon as I finish filming. Also, my Christmas nails. So cute. The last thing I have to talk about, not something I have right here, but I'll just shove a picture up. I got from the Hedgehog Fibers Black Friday sale. So this is what I consider to be a little industry secret, because not a lot of people know that Hedgehog Fibers stock GO. And for Black Friday every year they do 25%, or at least in the last few years they've done 25% off. And last year on Reddit I saw someone say that they got GO needles from the Hedgehog Fibers Black Friday sale, and I was like, that's genius. I need to do that. So I basically counted down the days until Black Friday this year, and when Hedgehog Fibers announced their sale, I went straight to the website and I bought myself a set of GO needles. I didn't buy the full set because I don't use anything really above 5mm, so I bought just the small half of the set. I think it starts at 2.75mm maybe, or 3mm, and it goes up to 5mm, I think. Can't remember off the top of my head now. But anyway, at full price it was €133. With 25% off, I got it for around €100, which I thought was really, really good. I've already swatched for an upcoming project because I'm just so eager to cast on with these needles. So I'm going to make a plain stockinette jumper. I don't know if it's going to be the Monday sweater or a drop shoulder sweater, because I don't know if I like a raglan. It will be a very basic stockinette jumper, and the yarns that I'm using are Pigment and Ply. This was from her in-stock sale. Oh, sorry, it's a little ball. I do have 3 full skeins, but this was from her in-stock sale last January, and it was essentially like a trial colorway, I guess, for one of her collections. So it didn't really have a name, or I can't remember if it did or not. But anyway, it's just got these purples and blues in it. And I'm holding it with Filcolana Tilia, and I can't remember the color name, but it's a light purple. And yeah, it knits up into this lovely fabric. I'm trying it out on 3.5mm needles, and that's probably what I'm going to stick with for the jumper. I, again, haven't decided on a pattern. I don't know what gauge I'm supposed to hit, but this is the gauge I'm going to work with. I kind of like the density of this fabric, and it's going to be a very low stakes project, very mindless, and I don't want to think too much about gauge or anything. So whatever my gauge is, that's what I'm going to work with. So that is everything. Actually, no, it's not. The yarn shop directory. This came up because of Voltram, I think, and the Lamana Coma Grande. That was what initially made me think about doing this. So I mentioned a few episodes ago that I was going to, or thinking of making some kind of directory where it was particularly for Irish yarn buyers or knitters who wanted to buy these Scandinavian brands like Knitting for Olive, Filcolana, Holst Garn, Gepard Garn, a directory of yarn shops who would stock those yarns and also ship to Ireland. So I said I was going to make like a directory of these yarn shops, and there was a lot of interest for that in the comments, which was great to see, and I just didn't get around to it for a while, but I'm pleased to report that I've made a start. I currently have 30 shops on the list, and I'm hoping that I can get it up to 50 before I publish this episode. So hopefully Editing Michaela doesn't have to make any changes and blur out what I just said. I hope there will actually be 50 shops in the list by the time I upload this. I honestly just wanted to make it to help other Irish knitters, and obviously, basically, if these shops ship to Ireland, they will probably ship to other countries in Europe. So it's not just helpful for Irish people, but a lot of countries in Europe actually have yarn shops that stock these brands. So it might not be as, useful to people in other countries. Anyway, I will leave a link down below to the yarn shop directory. As of filming, I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to make it public, but as of uploading and editing, I hope I will have something figured out. So hopefully there will be a link in the description box below. And yeah, I did have a few people in the comments offer to remunerate me somehow for this, and my intention for it was always just to be a helpful resource, but 1 or 2 people were pretty keen on paying somehow, either through someone literally just said, let me buy you a coffee or something. So I actually do have a Ko-fi or a coffee, or however you pronounce it, that's associated with my crochet designs that I made a long time ago and sold, they're actually still up there. But if you want to contribute to my coffee or my Ko-fi or whatever it's called, you can do that there. Or if you prefer, you could gift a pattern from my Ravelry wish list. Again, only if you want to, only if you find this yarn shop directory and helpful and you want to, you know, contribute somehow to the time that went into it. There's absolutely no obligation, no pressure. There was no expectation. There never was when I first suggested it. It was only after seeing a couple comments that I was like, well, if people really want to, I will give an option for them to contribute somehow. But yeah, there's absolutely no pressure whatsoever. And I just hope some of you find it helpful. Off the top of my head right now, I can't remember what yarn brands I have listed there. I know Knitting for Olive, Sandnesgarn, Filcolana, Isier, Gepard, Holzgarn, maybe one or two others. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but the intention is to add more in the future, but I wanted to start small because there are so many yarn shops out there, and to go through all of their websites to find out what brands they sell, to find their shipping policy, and sometimes the shipping policy is right there. It says, you know, how much the shipping cost is to EU countries, and you know, including Ireland. So I can just copy and paste from there. Sometimes I actually have to add something to my cart and type in my address and figure out from that what the shipping cost would be. I also didn't include shops that only stock one of those brands. I felt like it would be more worthwhile to include shops that sell more than one. So again, in the future I might expand the list, but for now, you know, that would just be an absolute monumental task. So it's just going to stay small enough for the moment. There is a good selection there. Voltram is there, Lily Com2, which is a French shop, is there. Garntopia, which is a Norwegian shop, is there. And yeah, with that being said, that is the end of the episode. I hope you enjoyed. I'm sorry about the lighting situation. It's gone just so downhill since I started recording, but that's just the time of year. I can't do anything about it. And it's kind of cozy, no? Maybe just a little bit. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, if you're not subscribed, please do consider subscribing. We'd love to have you here to join us more often. Hopefully I'll see you in the next episode, but until then, happy knitting. Bye.